Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. I'm Brian Parks, and in this video, I want to show you just how easy it is to run an automated pen test against your web application. So let's just get right into it. So here I've got ZAProxy, or I guess ZAProxy, also called ZAP, or the website is ZAProxy.org. It's an open source product built by the OWASP project, the Open Web Application Security Project. Completely open source, free to use, runs on Java. So in order to install this, I had to install a Java virtual machine, a JRE, Java Runtime Environment. And it actually runs on Java 8. I'm on Windows, so I went off to Microsoft's website. They have a Windows build of Java. They've made an agreement with Oracle, so they can create the Windows builds of the newer versions of Java, but they only have Java 16 and Java 11 available. So I actually had to go back to Oracle's website to download Java 8. Now Java 8 is, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's before the changes to Oracle's Java license agreement that everyone was up in arms about a couple of years ago. So if you're worried about having to pay Oracle money to use Java, don't worry about that. This is a version that is still under the old licensing that allowed everybody to use it free of charge. If you're on a Linux platform, of course you can use the OpenJDK, OpenJRE. That works perfectly fine. But I'm on Windows, so I have the official Oracle Java 8 and ZAProxy. Now, as you can see, it's been scanning while I've been talking, and it's about 15% done with the scan. I'm actually going to go ahead and pause that so I can talk you through some of the things that I did. And you can see it's still running. I think these are just requests that it had fired off before I clicked pause that now have their responses have come back. So I'm running Glassminnow in a Docker container using the standard Docker container that I've been using for the dev environment for the last several weeks. But when you first jump into ZAProxy, you get this quick start screen, which, let me zoom in a little bit. You have some options. You can do an automated scan, a manual explore, or you can learn more. I'm going to start with automated scan, and then we'll talk a little bit about what Manual Explorer can do for you. So automated scan is actually that screen that I was on when I first switched over to demo mode. So the URL to attack is the URL of my Docker container. Currently it's running on port 49153. So that's what I put in there. I wanted to use the traditional Spider and the Ajax Spider because there is some Ajax in this app. Not a whole lot, but there's enough that I didn't want that to get missed. Now, if your application is more like a single page application, you're using something like React or Angular or a Vue or something along those lines, you absolutely definitely want to check that box so that it can catch both the JavaScript side and the API request side. And then you can just click that attack button. Which obviously is grayed out right now because I have an attack in progress. Now, what that starts doing is first, it runs the traditional Spider, which is the same sort of Spider that, or you might know the term crawler, a similar sort of thing that search engines use to discover the web pages on your website or web app. So it starts with the URL to attack that you've provided, and it basically clicks. It's a headless browser, so clicks all of the links that it finds, adds those URLs to its list of known URLs, and continues to do that until it either finds no new pages that it's never seen before, or at least no pages that are substantially different from pages that it's found before. So for instance, if you have, let's just say for sake of argument, you have a page that takes a single parameter that all it does is reflect that parameter back on the screen. And you have let's say it's an int or a number. So there's actually a link to go to the next one. Think like XKCD, except instead of showing a comic, it shows the number. So you could keep hitting next and you would keep seeing the next number in line. Obviously, there are an infinite number of pages that could be created just from that URL, just by changing that query string parameter. At a certain point, something like this will say, okay, I've seen enough examples. I know that no matter what value I put for the parameter, I'm not going to see anything significantly different. Now, of course, if there was a case where you'd see something significantly different, that's when that manual explore would come into play. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like in just a minute. Next, it moves on to the Ajax Spider. And basically what it does there, you can see a lot of these are out of scope. It's mostly CSS and JavaScript files from third parties that are included in the application. So it's really focusing on the URLs that are part of the application, and it tries to click around and see what parts of the page change and make sure that it catches all of the API URLs that might be used. And then finally, once it's detected kind of ideally all possible URLs in your system, then it does what's called an active scan. And the active scan is the actual attack, where it sends normal looking requests to all of those URLs, all of those APIs, based on the forms that it sees in the application that post to certain URLs, the API calls that get sent in response to button clicks in your single page app, and that sort of thing. And also intentionally, maliciously crafted requests with the intent of exposing some sort of vulnerability. So we'll actually see in alerts, in this application, there are a lot of stack traces, there are some cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, and those are just kind of the easy ones to find. But ZAProxy or ZAP does a really good job at finding the entire picture. And actually for this video, I was hoping to get an example of another tool kind of like this. For one reason or other, I don't have access to that yet. If I do get access to that in the near future, I will do a follow-up video kind of comparing ZAProxy and this other tool. This other tool I've used in the past at a previous company. I found it to be great, but to be honest, that was before I'd ever used ZAProxy. I'm very impressed with what ZAProxy provides, and I can get over the whole I had to install Java in order to use it aspect. I'm really impressed with what this has done. So let's actually go over to alerts and see some of the things that it's found. So you'll notice down this left side, the vulnerabilities that it's discovered are listed in kind of, I guess, risk order. Level of vulnerability order. And these roughly correspond to the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. If you're not familiar with that list, go Google OWASP top 10. There are a few different revisions of it. I think the most recent one is 2017, maybe 2020. But go ahead and check that out. There's a lot of good information about what those vulnerabilities are, how to expose them, and how to fix them, kind of the general how to fix them. So it's not language specific, it's definitely language agnostic, but any one of these vulnerabilities can pop up in any implementation on any platform in any language. So really good resource. But here we notice path traversal. Now, I'm actually kind of curious as to why it thinks this is this vulnerability exists, because path traversal typically means that you have a parameter somewhere where you can insert a path, and they've determined that you can add ... and go up some directories and potentially expose system files. So that's kind of a nuanced one that I'm actually going to need to look into, because I'm 99% sure this application doesn't use any paths anywhere. So this is probably just a false positive. But at the same time, even if you get false positives, especially in the high and medium categories, that's really where people are going to be looking to determine how secure your application is. Even if you have false positives there, if there's a way that you can make that false positive go away, make it so that these pen test tools don't show a vulnerability in those cases, you're going to be far better off. Typically, in my experience, those false positives actually are indicative of code smells anyway, so it's a good idea to do something to address them. But then next we have the orange, kind of this orange cluster here, and including application error disclosure. And this is probably the most common error you're ever going to see in any application. It's really easy to have a server error, a 500 error, and most application stacks automatically try to show a stack trace or show an error message of some sort. And that's generally bad, right? That you might have internal information that in the wrong hands could be used to further attack your app. It in itself is not necessarily a security issue from the perspective of it's leaking data, but that tells an attacker more about your application than you ever want them to know. They can use that information that they've gotten from that error message to do even more damage to your application. I'm not going to go through every single one of these and talk about what they are and why they exist. You can find more information about them. If you want me to talk about any specific one of these, I'd be more than happy to. Go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll talk about it in a future video. I've already have a few of these that I want to talk about the rest of this week. So basically, depending on the results from this scan, I was going to talk about 4 of the more common ones in this code base, and what I'm going to do to fix them. But some of the other ones that are worth mentioning are buffer overflow. So this is you send a really long string, and I think in this case it actually bombs. It says this string is too big. That should be handled a little bit better way. Apparently I have a vulnerable JavaScript library, so that one should actually be a pretty easy fix. Just upgrade the library. My guess is that it's probably jQuery. jQuery is one of the most commonly used libraries on the web. Frequently vulnerabilities are found against it just because of what it does, not necessarily because jQuery is bad in any way, but just because of what it does. It kind of lends itself to new and different vulnerabilities. So they're always patching it and releasing new versions. And obviously this code base has not been updated in several years. One that I'm not seeing, but I know exists, is cross-site scripting. Maybe it's just listed under a different name. That it might be under like parameter tampering or something like that. There are a few cookie-related ones as we get down into the low category. I am going to mention those because I think those are good things to do, even though they're in the low category. And there are some quick, simple changes you can make to improve the security of your cookies, and that reduces the attack surface. So just from looking at this list, what I'm going to do, and the way I look at these when in the real world, when I get pen test results like this, the things that I do are I start with the high and medium in that order and determine what's a true positive and what's a false positive. I address the true positives first and see if I can explain the false positives. Some people might be okay with an explanation for the false positives. Some people aren't. So the second priority for me is trying to find a way so that those false positives don't show up as false positives. Like I said before, sometimes they're really indicative of code smells. So I try to address the code smells so that so that they don't show up as vulnerabilities in a pen test like this. Then I move on to the lows. The lows are definitely a case of diminishing returns. The lows typically they're less severe, right? They're low risk, they're low severity, and they typically take a lot more development effort to address. Again, with the exception of the cookies, the cookie changes can go pretty quick. So that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to let this scan run overnight and see what comes back from it. This is actually the second scan because I did a first scan, just an automated scan, and I realized that it wasn't capturing all of the URLs. So I actually did two things that I want to show you. The first thing is on the file menu. There's this session property. If I try to zoom in, you don't see the file menu. So file menu, session properties. And then down here, you can change authentication. So what I did is you can actually click this select button once you've run a scan, and it'll let you choose from the URLs that the spider has found, or you can just type it in right here. Then you choose a username, password, and a password parameter. Username parameter in my case was, I think, just username, and password was just password. So that was pretty easy. But these are drop downs that allow you to choose a form field that it's found. I should also mention that depending on how your authentication works, if you're using NTLM, manual, script-based, JSON-based, there are different methods here. I'm using form-based, which basically means my application has a login form where you type in a username and password. I would say the vast majority of our applications are going to be doing something like this. Of course, if you're logging in with an OAuth provider, you're not going to be using form-based authentication. But basically, if you have a login form as part of your application that provides that login, that authentication process, you'll want to choose form-based authentication here. So I'm going to cancel out of I'm just going to close this dialog. The other thing I did was manual explore. And on the manual explore tab, same as on the automated, automated attack, automated scan, you have a URL to explore. Enable HUD, this is the heads up display, provides some, it's like a browser plugin sort of thing that allows you to interact with how Zap is detecting and using the data that it's collecting as you go through your manual exploration. And then you just click launch browser. Firefox seems to be the best supported. I tried Chrome earlier and it gave me some errors. But if I choose Firefox and click launch browser, you'll see what this looks like in just a minute as it loads. So obviously it's loaded the URL, and it's actually gone directly to the login page. And it shows you some information about the heads up display. You can take a tutorial, or you can just continue to the target. I did not dive into the heads-up display because for what I'm doing, I don't really think I need it. So I just continue to target, and then you can see it's already annotated some of the fields based on previous scan results. But I can log in, and I'm not actually going to log in just in case my password shows up somewhere. But I can sign in, and it will run through the login process, and then I can explore the app from there. I can click around, and Zap will continue to capture everything that I'm doing there. So if I click on a link to go to a new URL, it'll include that URL in the Spider results, and so on and so forth. And then when you're done, you just close out the browser, and you'll notice that all of those URLs show up on the left side. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Obviously, there's a lot more to the application, but I think that's kind of the 80 to 90% of all use cases aspect. So if you want to use ZAProxy, again, free, open source. They actually have a headless version, so you can run it as part of a CI pipeline. I have not looked into that at all. I just know it's possible. I think that's basically you create a session here and then run the headless version on the existing session. And every time you run that, it will kind of use the authentication information that you've given it, the kind of a base list of URLs, and then it'll run the Spider, Ajax Spider, and then do an active scan based on that. So you can do that as part of a CI pipeline, or at least maybe once or twice before a new release goes out. So with that, I'm going to close out this video. Hopefully you found this helpful and informative. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. I really appreciate that. I think this is something that we really, as developers, need to be doing a lot more of. I mean, it's free, open source, runs on your desktop. How much simpler can it get? If you're not doing some sort of security testing, penetration testing on your application, you're definitely leaving a lot of knowledge out there undiscovered. And there may be some vulnerabilities in your application that you didn't even realize were there. I discovered that there were some cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in Glassminnow that I didn't know existed. I mean, I kind of suspected because I wasn't really paying attention to that when I first built the application. Shame on me, I should have been. But I didn't realize how prevalent they were. They're definitely more prevalent than I had anticipated. So that's something that I absolutely will be looking into as I continue to maintain Glassminnow. But something like this is an indispensable tool, invaluable, gives you a lot of information about your application that you probably didn't even know was there. So I highly recommend doing this. But yeah, hit that thumbs up button if you liked the video. Go ahead and leave a comment down below if there are specific aspects of this that you want me to dive deeper into, and I'd be more than happy to. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified when all of the next videos get released, including when I dive deeper into some more aspects of this. So with that, I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.